Lawrence Woodcraft raised two daughters inside Scientology. Now Lawrence, Zoe, and Astra have left the group, and Astra has a daughter of her own. Recently, they visited the Lisa McPherson Trust to share their stories. Astra spoke to Stacy Brooks about Scientology's impact on their family and the dramatic steps she took to escape from Scientology.
This is Kate Woodcraft. Kate, you want to say hi to the camera? Say hi to everybody. Astra, why don't you tell us the story of Kate?
I had been in the Sea Org for about 4 years at this point, and I was 19, and I hadn't been happy the whole time, but I'd never really admitted it. And then my dad's mother died, and I was able to get a week off to go to her funeral in England. So I spent some time with my family. I hadn't seen my family in England for 10 years. I spent some time with my dad. I hadn't been able to spend a lot of time with him for the whole time I was in the Sea Org. And it just dawned on me that I couldn't take it anymore. I wanted to be able to see my family. I knew I'd never ever be able to go back to England and see my family again. And I knew I wouldn't hardly be able to see my dad because I had already been told I wasn't allowed to see him other than this trip. But I had never said, you know, I want to leave. I had never said I'm not happy, because if you want to leave, it takes like a year, 6 months to a year. You have to do hard labor, you have to wear like gross clothes, and you're put under watch. Someone's watching you the whole time, and you're called, they call you a degraded being.
What does that mean?
That means you're like a criminal, like a bad person, like scumbag. And the staff refer to you that way. The commanding officer, Ron Norton, would regularly go up to the staff who wanted to leave and say, "Are you still a degraded being?" And they'd have to say yes if they still wanted to leave. So every single staff member is going to sneer at you, look down on you. It's just a horrible feeling, and then you're trapped for 6 months because, I mean, people would say, why can't you just walk away? But I have my mom, I have my brother, and I have my sister and my grandma in the Sea Org. If I just walked away, they'd never ever speak to me again. And I couldn't take that at that point, you know? So it was partly that I couldn't stand the idea of like 6 months to a year of hard labor, but it was more that I knew they would just change my mind back, because that's what regularly happened. That's what one of my jobs was, to change people's minds back who wanted to leave.
But how did you do that?
Well, you know, it's just like duress. Like, you're out ethics, which like means you do like bad things, you've done bad things, you've done criminal things. What are you hiding? You know, and you're forced to admit, you know, thoughts you've had, bad thoughts you've had, things you've done. You get to the point where, you know, you would rather just stay there than just, you know, have people looking at you like that, calling you things like that, harassment on a daily basis, being under watch. You know, it's like the difference between if you were in a minimal security prison where you have some freedom, and then you're going to be sent to the high security prison, you know, and you just say, okay, I'll stay, but I'll just go back to the minimal security prison because at least, you know, I'm treated like somewhat of a person, as opposed to... So that's what it's like, and it was my job to do that at one point, and I knew they'd be able to break me because I wanted to leave so bad, and my resolve was really strong, but so were a lot of people's. And I knew they'd break me, you know, over and over and over. And I thought, I'm going to have to do something where then I just have to go. There's no choice. And the rule was, okay, first you're allowed to have kids. Then when I went into the Sea organization, you got sent away to lower org. About a year before I decided to leave, they made a new rule. And that rule was, if you get pregnant, you get an abortion. If you won't get an abortion, you're out. And you're out, and they give you a big bill.
So you lose your job altogether.
You lose your job altogether. Yeah, and you're still considered a degraded being and all of that, but they just kick you out. First, they very strongly try and coerce you to get an abortion, and I know several people who did, which I can go over in a bit. But so I thought, and I wanted children too, and I had been married since the age of 15, and I hated being married. My husband and I didn't get along at all. we could not talk about it because I couldn't. The main reason was I didn't want to be there, and I could never tell him. And it was just ridiculous, you know, being married at 15. I had known him for 3 months. I didn't know him, you know. So I didn't want to be married, but I had the impression that I would never want to be married again because this is what marriage is like. But I did want children, so I thought, I'll have a baby. They'll let me go. I'll have a baby, you know, without having to get married again, because I never want to get married again, which is not true now. That's how I felt then. And I thought that way I'll get pregnant. If I refuse to have an abortion, if they can't break me on that, which I knew they couldn't once I was pregnant, then they won't be able to do anything other than let me go. And I won't have my husband come with me because I don't want to be married to him, and I didn't really think he wanted to be married to me anyway. And at that point, I wanted to leave so badly, but I felt like I was a bad person. So I felt that I shouldn't make him come out too, because that would be even worse. Up till after I left, I still felt it's my fault. I've been a bad person. I've done things wrong. I can't, you know, confront my crimes, but I have to leave because I can't stand it. Because that's the whole like thing in Scientology is if anything goes wrong, if you get sick, if you break something, it's your fault. You know, you've done something wrong. It's never like someone else's fault. So that's what I thought. So this was in October of '97, and in about December, end of December, early January, I got pregnant. And but I didn't tell anybody. And I was very sick. I had really bad morning sickness. I couldn't eat. I was throwing up about 20 times a day, but throwing up nothing because I wasn't eating, just, you know, going through the motions. But I'd be working and I'd run downstairs to the bathroom and do it really quietly so no one would hear me, and no one knew. And I was so terrified to leave, but I decided because I was so sick and I was so tired that I was just going to take off. I was going to get on a plane and go stay with my family in England for a little while I like got better, and then I would come back. I planned on following their policies on leaving, because if I just took off and didn't come back, they would declare me a suppressive person, which means that my mom, my sister, my grandma, my whole family would never speak to me again, and I didn't want that to happen. At that point, I was planning on still being a Scientologist, being a good Scientologist and all of that.
You just didn't
wanted to leave.
Yeah, in the Sea organization.
Yeah, I just couldn't take it anymore. So my plan was to go to England for a little while, then come back and do their process of leaving, and then leave. So that's what I did in the end of February. One day I got a day off because no one knew what was going on. I had been awarded, you know, one of the best staff member awards, and, you know, they thought I was great. You know, they thought I was a really good staff member. Everything was wonderful. And one day I took the day off, and I went and saw my dad. And they told me I can't go see him, but I went and saw him anyway. And then the next morning, I had already packed all my clothes in my car, and I just went to the airport. And I went and checked my baggage, and as I was walking through the security thing where they check on baggage, my brother walks up. My brother's in the Sea Org, and he goes, "Hi, Astra," and he was with a security guard from where I worked.
You're kidding.
I'm not kidding.
What did you do? Okay,
it freaked me out, but I had half expected it because I used to have to do that.
Oh.
I used to be sent to the airport to get people who were taking off. But I was very surprised that they knew exactly what terminal I was going to be in and everything. And so he says, "Hi, Astra," and I said, "Hi, Matthew," and I walked straight into the bathroom. And I figured, I will just sit in the bathroom until my flight is boarding. And I walked straight from the bathroom to get on my flight. So I did. I sat in the bathroom. He sent a little girl in to tell me to come out. And I said, "Thank you." And I stayed in there. Then, after everyone had left the bathroom, he came into the bathroom. And I wouldn't open the stall. And he climbed over and started talking to me.
You're kidding.
And so finally I said, "Okay, I'll come out." Because
what was he saying to you?
He was saying, "I have Mom on the phone. Mom wants to talk to you." I was terrified of anyone talking me out of going. I knew they'd be able to. I was sick. I hadn't eaten for like weeks. I hadn't been able to keep anything down. I was exhausted. I was like on the verge of a mental breakdown if I hadn't already had one. She's asleep. So I knew, you know, they just had to say a couple words, and I was feeling guilty. I was wanting to leave, but I was feeling so guilty that what I was doing was so bad. I had written notes to people saying, you know, crying, saying, this is all my fault, I'm a horrible person, I've done wrong, but I have to go.
You'd left notes for people?
Yeah, for my dad and for my husband. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I had like this much resolve left to get on that plane. So I said, okay, I'll come out. So I just stayed in there for like another 10 minutes, and then my plane was boarding, because I knew what time, I figured, you know, 20 or 30 minutes before it took off, it would be boarding. So I walked straight from the bathroom, and I had written a note to my brother, and this was the first time anyone knew I was pregnant. I had said, I'm pregnant, I'm going to see my cousin, I'll come back. And I gave him that note, and I kept walking.
I mean, you gave him that note in the bathroom?
Well, I came out of the bathroom at that point, and I gave him the note.
So you didn't even want to talk to him?
No, I did not want to talk to him. So, and I started walking, and then the security guard, whose name is Mike Valiente, started saying to me, you know, we can work it out, you know, the typical lines, we can work it out, let's just sit down and talk, let's calm down, blah, blah, blah. I just ignored him. I said, read the note I just gave my brother, and I kept walking. I was waiting in line to board, and my brother was standing there with me, and I was crying. I started crying. People were looking at me, and I said, I'm just going to cool down, to get better, and I will come back. I won't get declared a suppressive person. I'll come back. And my brother says to me, you're not being a Sea Org member. Obviously not the brightest thing to say to me at that point. And I said, well, I'm not going to be anymore. And he's like, you need to speak to Mom. She's on the phone. She feels really bad. Well, I know how my mom is, and she's not going to be saying, oh, Astra, it's going to be okay. She's going to be saying, you know, you need to go back, you know, because she's a very fanatical Sea Org member. So, so I was just trying to ignore him, and I got my boarding pass, and then I was waiting in line to board. I had my passport and my ticket in my hand. Luckily, I was holding on tightly because my brother got desperate and tried to yank them out of my hand and make a run for it so that I couldn't leave. I was holding on tightly, and he, you know, it was like a little back and forth, and he let go.
What were the other people doing?
I snatched it, but I don't know. I mean, I was crying. I was a mess, so I knew people were looking at me, but I didn't really know. I mean, I would have called security, other than the fact that one, he's my brother, and two, you know, I thought I'd get declared a suppressive person if I did that, because if you report anyone to the authorities. Right. So I was trying to keep it cool, but I'm like, oh my God, he's trying to take my ticket and my passport. So I said, I can't believe you did that, and I just got on the plane. Then a stewardess comes up to me with a note from my brother saying, when you land, call your mother, you know, because he'd been saying to me, she's on the phone, I have her on the phone, you have to speak to her, you have to speak to her. So I'm just crying. I'm a total mess. I got on, you know, I'm on the plane. But you
got on the plane.
And it took off, and I was like, oh my God.
Incredible.
So my plan when I landed, I had maybe $25 or $30. Was going to change it to English money and catch a bus to my aunt's house. I didn't even know. I knew their address. That was about it. I had no plan. I had, you know, $30 in my pocket after the ticket because I spent all my money on the ticket. And but what I didn't know, what I found out after is, obviously at that point they knew where I was going. I was going to England. My mom was was arranging with where I worked with the security department to get people from the organization in England, security, to meet me at the airport, which I knew that was going to happen, because that was what happens. If you can't stop them getting on the plane, you have someone, because they have organizations everywhere, meet them at the airport and send them back, or, you know, whatever they're going to do at that point. So I figured that was going to happen. That was what I was expecting. But what had actually happened was my dad had said, if you have people at the airport, she is going to flip out. I'll have my sister meet her, then you know, because he was trying to do what was best for me. So I expected them to be at the airport. So I got off the plane, I changed my clothes, and I put my hair up, and I threw away my umbrella, because I thought they'd say she had an umbrella with it because it was pouring during that time. And you know, so I thought I looked totally different, so no one would recognize me, because the people in England didn't know me. They'd only recognize, you know, they'd give a description of what I was wearing. So then after all of this, I finally walk out, and there's my aunt and uncle, and I was so happy, because they have nothing to do with Scientology. They don't like it at all. And I was so happy, but they had been waiting for like an hour, because I was doing all this stuff, getting myself all disguised. So I was just so happy. I was like, oh my God, because I was tired, I was sick, and they were just going to, and then I could just go to their house. They were going to take me. So then we went to their house, and then I called my dad, and then I called my mom, and my mom instantly started off crying, saying, you know, you need to come back, you need to stay in the Sea Org. The main thing she did was she used my sister. Zoe didn't even want to be there, but I didn't know that. And she was saying, Zoe's plan is to come to LA and be in the Sea Org with you. And, you know, what am I going to tell her? What am I going to tell her? What should I tell her? And she's saying, you should get an abortion. I know how it is to have a child when you're young. It's too much.
Your mother was telling you this?
My mother was the main person who was like, you have to get an abortion. Because I then ended up speaking to, like, the authorities in the Sea Org. But I said to them, because once mentioned abortion, and he said, L. Ron Hubbard says, I said, L. Ron Hubbard says abortion isn't okay. And he said, L. Ron Hubbard says it is okay because he says the spirit doesn't enter the body until right before birth. So if you have an abortion before that, and I knew that. That was like the line going round. If you have an abortion before, when the baby's only a few months old or a few weeks, it doesn't affect anyone. It's just like killing an animal because the spirit's not there, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, someone said that to me again, and I said, look, if anyone says to me the word abortion, I will not come back. I don't want to hear it. And I was just really mad. I said, I don't want to hear it. No one better speak to me about it. I'll just hang up. I refuse to speak to anyone. I will not cooperate. I said, otherwise I will.
Who were these people talking to you?
There was, oh God, what's his name? It's, I forgot his name. He was a very high up executive. But his job was also the chaplain, because that was one of the posts underneath him that was unfilled. So he was doing it from the chaplain point of view. Chaplain telling you to get an abortion. His name will come to me in a minute. But
okay.
Then I spoke to a woman named Kirsty Wilhare, who was like my senior's senior. And I spoke to a girl who was a friend of mine and my husband's friend. And I spoke to a man named Jeff Porter, who's the Chief of Security International.
I know Jeff.
Yeah, so do I.
I know Jeff.
I have other things to say, but yeah, he was just like, you come back or you get declared. Kirsty was nice and saying, just come back, let's sort it out. The other man, whose name will come to me, was the one who mentioned abortion. I said, don't ever mention it again. But my mother continuously mentioned it regularly. You should get an abortion. What am I going to tell Zoe? You should get an abortion. How are you going to raise the baby? You should get an abortion. You should get an abortion. You should get an abortion. Just repeatedly.
How old was Zoe at that point?
13, probably, 12 or 13. That was what got to me the most, was the sister thing, because I didn't know she didn't want to be there, and I thought I had just ruined her entire life's plan and messed everything up for her.
Because you two couldn't talk about this either.
No. In fact, my mom never even told Zoe about it. Zoe found out about it because she saw a report that my husband had written on my dad, saying it was all my dad's fault. I'll go into that later too, but that's how Zoe found out. No one ever told her. So that was what almost got to me, but I just kept saying to her, Mom, I can't live my life. I've lived my life based off of what you want, and I'm finally doing what I want. I can't now change it because of what you're saying Zoe wants. I said, I feel very, very bad. I don't know what to say to her, but all I know is the most important thing is, I have to do what I want to do, and this is what I want to do. And she just never got it. She never got it to this day that, I'm doing what I want to do. I said, I'll go back on April 1st. I'll be back on April 1st. And I actually came back 2 weeks earlier. I flew back and I stayed with my dad for a couple weeks. I went and saw a doctor. I started getting everything under control.
But were you able to start getting sleep and eating?
Yeah, because at my aunt's house, she got me some prenatal vitamins, some folic acid, which is important to take, all these things. I was able to start eating. Because part of the reason was I was very sick, and the other part of the reason was the food there is hard enough to eat when you're feeling well. When I was feeling nauseous, I could not stomach, the food that they served. Right. Now I was eating actual regular food and I could stomach it. And my morning sickness went from being sick 10 times a day or more to once every couple days, which is a bit more normal. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I got a lot of rest, and I helped at their work for a couple hours a day, and I talked with my aunt. My aunt's like a wonderful lady, and she was really helping me. I was saying, my mom's saying I should get an abortion. What do you think I should do? And she said, you should do whatever you want to do, And my dad had said to me, you do whatever you want to do, and I will support you, He said, if you want to keep the baby, and he got in big trouble for this, just for saying, if you want to keep the baby, I will support you. You can come live with me, you can work for me, I'll help you. And he got in really big trouble. My mom screamed at him, you're a suppressive person, I'm going to get you declared. All kinds of stuff. So anyway, so I ended up going back. 2 weeks before I said I would. They didn't know I was in LA because they'd come and get me. I stayed with my dad. I went and saw a doctor, got everything even more under control, and then I went back on April 1st. And that was really hard to do.
Yeah, I bet it was.
It was really, really, really hard to do. I was terrified.
But were you stronger feeling than you had been when you left?
Yeah, but I was still terrified, and I was dreading the next month or however long it was going to take. I was really, really dreading it. But it was that or never see my family again. So I did it. I went back, but I said, I'm going to stay with my dad, and every day I will come in and I will get a confessional. I'll do everything you want, but I'm going to stay with my dad because I need proper food, I need a nice bed, I need all this stuff. You can't provide that for me.
Because you were having to get a security check.
Yeah, the confessional.
Every day.
Yeah. So.
And what's the purpose of that when somebody's leaving? Why is that happening?
Because, well, one of the reasons is L. Ron Hubbard says in a policy, the only reason that people want to leave is because they have overts and withholds. They have things they've done that are wrong that they're withholding. And if you get them to admit these things and handle them, they will...
they'll stop wanting to leave.
Yeah, they'll stop wanting to leave. But at that point I was pregnant, I was going to leave anyway. But so that at that point it was more for a security purpose. They wanted to find out. Most of the questions they asked me were security related. You know, do you have any documents? Have you stolen anything? Have you, do you plan on going to a newspaper? Do you plan on speaking derogatorily about Scientology? You know, those were the main questions. So, and then it was like, have you done anything wrong on the 2D, which means have you done anything like sexually bad, like had bad thoughts, you know, had sex with someone else, nothing of which I'd done. But they, of course, are going to ask that because that's another thing they consider is a lot of the bad things you do are related to like sexual things. So I said, I'm going to stay with my dad, and I'm going to do, I'll come in every day and do whatever you want me to do, but I'm going to stay with my dad. And they said, you can't. You have to, and I knew they'd say this, you have to stay in your, they said, you can stay in your old room, but you have to stay there. And I said, well, what am I going to eat? And they're like, oh, we'll work it out or whatever. So I was arguing with the security guard that I wanted to stay with my dad, and he finally said, he was threatening me, and then he finally said, okay, this process is going to take 3 or 4 days. So if in 3 or 4 days you're not done, you can go back and stay with your dad. So I said, okay, write that down. So they had the security chief, Richard Metzler, write down, if you're not done, you're going to be done with your process by this date. And if you're not, you can go back and stay with your dad while you finish it. So 4 days later, I don't even think they'd started my confessional. They may or may not have. That's another big thing, is you have to have a confessional before you leave. They have no one to do it. That's why people are there for 6 months to a year. But I knew they were going to rush mine a bit. They didn't want the staff seeing me getting more and more pregnant, because it would give people ideas to get pregnant, that's what's being done.
And you weren't looking pregnant yet?
I didn't look pregnant at all till after I left. You couldn't tell at all. No one knew, and everyone the few people who did know were told on no uncertain terms can they tell anybody else. So 4 days later I said, okay, I'm going back to stay at my dad's house because I'm not done yet. And they said, if you do that, you will be put under non-interpolation order, which means if you do one more thing that's, that upsets somebody, for instance, saying, I'm going back to my dad's house, or anything, if you don't cooperate 100%, you will then be declared a suppressive person. So they might as well have said, if you go back to your dad's house, you'll be declared a suppressive person.
Right.
And I said, well, I have this note. The security chief wrote it. I got it written down, because that's our big thing, get everything in writing. I have it written down. That I can go back. And he said, well, we just wrote that so that you'd stay, and you have no choice but to stay, and if you go back, this is what's going to happen.
Incredible.
So I just thought, fine, I'll just stick it out and just get this over with, because I really had no choice at that point. So then I started going in for my confessionals, and I told you what the questions were already. It was like, what have you done? And at that point I still thought that the e-meter works, and if I didn't tell all, I was in big trouble, and they'd know. So I, of course, told every thought I ever had, told all this stuff, probably made up stuff to make it sound good, because if you don't make it really sound like you've done something, then they're not going to believe you. Mm-hmm. And every day then in the evening at about 6 I'd say I'm leaving, and I'd go back to the room and I'd have to eat like a microwaved meal, like, you know, Stouffer's microwaved macaroni and cheese or something, which isn't what I wanted to eat at all. I was having a hard time stomaching that. Then during the day I was really tired. I was tired all the time, and during the day I would have to come back in the morning, and they were supposed to set me up a bed that I could nap in while I was waiting, because I'd have to wait hours for my confessional, but they never set it up. I had to sleep on the floor in like a little tiny office on the floor with a blanket every day while waiting. And then they were saying, what are you doing sleeping all the time? You should be doing your ethics handling, which means like reading policies on ethics, Scientology policies on ethics, and, you know, all kinds of stuff to, you know, to handle me so I'd be a better person.
Well, to make you decide that you should stay.
Yeah, and have an abortion, or if that didn't work, you know, to stop me from doing anything against Scientology in the future. Mm-hmm. At one point, I was standing outside waiting for a ride back to where I was going to stay, and a staff member from the Religious Technology Center, which is like the very highest organization in Scientology, and these people, like, you're terrified of. Everyone is. You have to call them sir. You can't do anything. If you, like, someone once tripped one of them or something and was...
you mean by accident?
By accident, totally by accident, or bumped into them, and he was, like, put on hard labor for accidentally tripping him. This is like how scary these people are. He comes up to me and he says, what are you doing, Astra? And I said, well, sir, I'm pregnant and I'm leaving. And he said, are you getting a confessional? I said, yes. And I was, of course, not saying it like this. I was saying, yes, sir, you know. And he said, oh, no, actually, let me rephrase that. He said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm pregnant, so I'm leaving. And he says, oh, too late for an abortion? And I said, no.
Unbelievable.
So then he said, are you getting a confessional? I said, yes.
Who was that?
You know, I wish I could remember his name. He had a little sports car, and he used to drive around, and the license plate said Standard Tech abbreviated on it. And he was very high up, very well known, but I forget his name. If someone told it to me, I would be able to say, yeah, that's his name. I knew he was scary. Yeah. He used to, like, scream at people, get in their face, spit on them, things like that. So I saw him do that and, like, grab people, and so I was terrified of him. That he said, oh, too late for an abortion. I was just like, I couldn't believe he even said that.
Incredible.
So then I continued getting my confessional. I finished that. I had to read some policies, and I had to write what's called knowledge reports on people who I had thought done bad things. And then I had to sign an affidavit. I knew I was going to have to sign that. That's another thing they have you do before you leave. And they write down all the bad things you've said you've done. And then they make you write up all the wins you've had in Scientology, which you, of course, have to make sound great, because if you don't, you're back for more confessionals, and you're not leaving till you sound like you love Scientology, and you're leaving because you did bad things. So I wasn't about to disagree with anything they said. I wrote up, in Scientology, you know, I've learned to communicate. When I came into the Sea Org, you know, I was very out ethics, and they really helped me, and if it wasn't for them, I don't know where I would have ended up. I just made it sound, I knew what I had to say, and I said it. And I also knew that whatever I signed was not legal, because they said, you can't leave unless you sign this. If you sign it, you're going to be declared a suppressed person. Your family will never see you again.
If you don't sign it.
If you don't sign it, so you better sign it before you leave. You have to. You have no choice. That's not legal, because that's duress. So I kind of had an idea of that.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm just going to sign it. And I wasn't planning on speaking out or anything. I still thought I want to be a Scientologist, etc.
Even after all of this, you still wanted to be a Scientologist?
Because you're so indoctrinated into the fact that it's your fault. Whatever happens, if you don't want to be there, it's your fault. You've done something out of ethics. You're a bad person. You're irresponsible. You know, you can't confront things. That I believed that. But I also just physically and mentally couldn't take it anymore. So I was leaving thinking I was a horrible person.
You just weren't good enough to be in the Sea Org.
I wasn't good enough. I couldn't make it. I didn't have what it takes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I signed it, and then I left. And they searched through my car and through my room to make sure I wasn't taking anything that belonged to them, or that was any documents or anything like that. They had, when I was there, put together my bill and given it to me. They give you a bill for, here's an example. I did like a computer course on how to learn to operate their computers. I did a course on how to do my job. They had a restructure of their management, and I did several courses on, you know, they had written a bunch of new policies on their new management. I had done that. And then I had gotten sec checks, confessionals, hours and hours and hours and hours of them. I'd gotten them before, because if you go on to high posts in like certain areas, you have to get one before you go in so they can make sure you're qualified. I had done all of this. I had done, you know, just 2 or 3 things that were actual, like, Scientology spiritual things. I did the purification rundown and a couple courses. The reason I'm saying that is the policy about freeloaders was written because apparently people used to go into the Sea Org just so they could get free service and then leave, because you don't have to pay for it if you're on staff most of the time. So they wrote this policy that if you leave, you have to pay them back for everything. I mean, the whole thing's ridiculous, but I hadn't even done Scientology. I had just done, like, training. Yeah. So they give me my bill. It's $89,000. And even I was in shock. I was like, I've only been here for 4.5 years, and I owe $89,000. But I thought, oh, I'm going to have to figure out how to pay. And I was so scared that I'm going to have to pay this. I started working out a budget before I left. Okay, I'm going to work full-time. I'll make $400 a week. I'll send them $100 every week. In 10 years, I'll have it paid off. And hopefully before then, I'll get a better-paying job. And I was writing it all down and trying to figure out how much stuff for the baby would cost so I could still send them like a quarter or half of my money. And my mom had said to my dad, do you know what Astra's freeloader bill is? And he said, no. And she said, it's $89,000. But it's not your problem. She's going to have to pay it. So that's my mom's point of view. So then after I left, that was basically it, except they called me several times because they wanted me to come in for interviews on various investigations they were doing. And I didn't want to come in. I was done. But I got more threats, so I had to. And I was asked about, when you did this job 3 years ago, did you say this to somebody? Mm-hmm. Did you tell people they could take a vacation without first getting a confessional? Things like that. So I had to go back in several times for that. And then that was about it, except I got called and sent mail regularly about my freeloader bill. Mm-hmm. They were asking me, get your dad to help you pay it. You know, don't you have some money somewhere? Doesn't your dad have some money? Can't you take a loan out to pay this money to them? I once sent them $20 just to say that I'd sent something, because my mom was like, just start sending money, just start, and soon you'll be able to pay it off. So that was all I ever sent, $20 or $25. When I was 8 months pregnant, my husband, when I had left, I had also told him, it's all my fault. I'm totally responsible. I feel really bad for what I've done to you. So you don't have to pay me anything. You don't have to pay child support. I don't expect you. I want you to be able to stay in the Sea Org, you know. But he had said, I want to be there when she's born. I want to see her, etc. And I was, you know, at the time fine with that. You know, I wasn't going to keep him from seeing her. But when I was 8 months pregnant, I all of a sudden got a letter from him. And he said, I've been thinking about it. And I knew he'd been told he had to do this. And I've decided that, you know, being in the Sea Org is the most important thing. I have this letter for the exact words, but something like, being in the Sea Org is the most important thing. And so I've decided not to see Kate and not to see you, and, you know, just be in the Sea Org, and that's it. And I hope you understand my decision. Mm-hmm. And I thought he could have at least called me, you know, he could have at least had the guts to call me up. So I thought, fine, you know, I'll just leave it. So I had Kate. And but his parents, I let them come see her because they were nice, and I wasn't going to stop them. I don't, you know, want to stop her family from seeing her, and they're her family. So they came every 2 weeks about and came to see her, came to visit for like a morning.
How did you feel about your baby?
Oh my God, I was so happy. I was so happy because in my pregnancy, other than the morning sickness, went really well, and when I had her, it went really well. And I was just really, really happy. I was just like amazed. I couldn't believe. I couldn't believe I had been able to leave, and I had my baby, and, you know, I had done it. I was just like, oh my God. I was so happy. I didn't care that I was doing it by myself. I didn't care about anything. I was just like, you know, I was so amazed that I'd been able to do what I wanted to finally, that I had like pushed it all the way through. And, you know, not gone back and relented, not had an abortion, and then she was like sitting there, and I just couldn't believe it. It was amazing. So then I called my mom, and she's like, oh, I'm proud of you. And she was nice about it, of course, because she's not going to be, you know, on the phone when I've just had a baby. She's not going to be like hostile. Jason, my ex-husband's parents, were coming to see her. Then when she was about 6 months old, I had been working full-time while I was pregnant. Up to the day I had her, I was working. And then I started working again within a week afterwards. But then, of course, it was not as many hours. I wasn't working full-time. I started not having any money, you know, to even be able to pay for things to her, to help pay for food or anything. And it got to the point of being ridiculous, and I felt I was draining money away from my father. So then I started thinking, and at this point I had changed my mind about Scientology. I had come to realize what it really was.
How had that happened?
Mainly, you know, it was my dad and I going back and forth, because neither of us thought it was really bad. He wanted me to leave the Seer. He thought the Seer was really bad, but going back and forth, swapping stories, and me telling him more and more. And as I told him more and more about what had happened, I realized more and more how bad this was, you know. As I told him, I wasn't allowed to make phone calls to you. I was told I couldn't see you. When I used to come and see you, it was in secret.
And he hadn't known this, of course.
He hadn't known that. When I told you I was going to school, I wasn't. Like, as I'm saying these things, I was coming to realize, and as we talked back and forth, that's what's so been the very best thing. If you have someone to talk about it with, who then says back to you, this, you know, doesn't say, you know, don't talk about it, and doesn't say, well, that's all your fault.
Right.
You come to realize that it was not your fault, and you have someone backing you up, you know, and it just was like it just came about like that. I started realizing more and more, and both of us got to the point where, like, oh my God, you know. So that's really how it came about. And then I read a book, L. Ron Hubbard, Messiah or a Madman.
By Ben Gordon.
Yeah, I just kind of flipped through it. I didn't read the whole thing, but I read parts of it, and that was it. You know, I had had enough at that point, but I wasn't going to say anything, because I still wanted my relationship with my mother and my grandmother and my brother. But anyway, so I'd gotten to the point where I really felt that I needed to get Jason to pay child support. And I no longer felt it's all my fault, I've done wrong, so I'm going to handle it. I felt like, hey, you need to, not necessarily him, but Scientology in general, so he should either get a job, you know, or they should, as part of his pay him some money that he could pay his child support, because you get paid $45 a week there. So I wrote him a letter. I said, you know, I've been thinking about it, and I really do need child support. You are her father, you are responsible. No answer, no reply. I wrote another letter a couple months later, no reply. I started calling. Finally, when she's about a year old, I had arranged a meeting. They said, come in, don't bring the baby, but come in and you'll speak to the lawyer at OSA and you'll speak to Jason. We'll get something worked out. Because he had said, I'll pay you a quarter of my pay every week. It's like $7, or what is that, like, sorry, like $10 or $12 a week. And I said, you know what, that's money like for you to buy shampoo. I'm not going to take away, you know, your shampoo money. That's ridiculous. I knew how it was to get $45 a week when you got paid, and that's horrible, and I'm not a horrible person. I wasn't going to take away the few dollars he had, and that's not what I wanted, and it wouldn't help me anyway. You know, $40 a month is just nothing. So I went in there. I took her with me. I never went anywhere without her at that point, really, and I wasn't about to leave her just because they said don't bring her, like don't let him see her. It might, you know, upset him or something. So I brought her with me anyway. They had...
Because he had never seen her.
He had never, ever seen her. He'd seen a picture because his parents showed him a picture, because I had given them pictures. At 6 months, when I had first written a letter about child support, all of a sudden her parents disappeared. Never heard from them.
Really?
Never heard from them again. And I realized after a period of time that that was why. And I asked Jason when I saw him, I said, your parents haven't heard from them in 6 months. Why is this? Do you know? And he said, yes. I got upset. You know, I was mad you're asking for child support. I told them not to see you anymore. And I was like, wow. He only admitted it to me at that point because he was trying to get on my good side. So he was trying to be honest with me, trying to get on my good side so I'd stop asking for child support. So I get there, and they have Helena Cobrin, who's a lawyer in OSA.
I know her very well.
And she said, oh, I'm just here to help explain to you so you understand, you know, the laws, and I've dealt with cases like this before, so you understand. So I said, okay, and she's like, well, Scientology isn't obligated to pay anything. And I said, I know that. I just said, Jason's obligated to pay, and he works here, so he either has to get a job or, you know, you guys pay him to pay me, pay him more money so that he can pay me child support. I said, I'm not asking Scientology to pay. I'm not saying Scientology is obligated to pay me 1 penny. He is obligated. So she said, well, I've dealt with cases like this before, and if it went before a judge would say he has the right to work wherever he wants. He's in a religious organization, so he doesn't have to pay. And I said, Because, see, when we got divorced, I put, I want full custody, legal and physical. And he didn't contest the divorce, so basically that's what the divorce said. And it said visitation to be determined by me and child support to be determined by a judge. And since I wasn't originally going to ask him for it, I never went and got like a hearing to determine it. So I said, well, I'll just go get a hearing and have the judge determine how much Jason should pay so that Jason knows what he's legally obligated to pay. They didn't want that, of course. And I said, look, from what I've studied, the judge always makes the decision based on the best interest of the child, not the parents. They don't care, about the parent. They care about the child.
You were feeling much stronger by now.
I was mad. I wasn't going to listen. I knew they were just lying to me. I knew it. And the judge is going to say, I need to determine the child's best interests, and you go get a job. And child support is based on what the parent can make, not what they do make. So if they choose to work at a job where they make $45, that doesn't mean they only have to pay out of that money. That means they need to go get a proper job. If they choose to only work 1 day a week, they can't say, well, I'm only going to pay child support out of my 1 day a week pay. No, they have to go get a proper job if they can. Mm-hmm. He has a college education. He could go get a job at least paying minimum wage, obviously paying, a lot more than that. So I said, look, this is what I know. This is what the judge is going to say. No one knows for sure what a judge is going to say, but this is what I guarantee, in my opinion, the judge is going to say. And they said, no. And I said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go speak to a lawyer. I'm going to ask him what he says. If he says what I say, then I'm just going to go get a hearing. I'm not suing, because if I sued, I get declared. I still didn't want to get declared. I said, I'm not suing. I'm just going to go get this hearing so that Jason knows what he's obligated to pay. So they said, fine. So I spoke to a lawyer, and he said exactly what I said. He said, I can't guarantee what a judge is going to say, but yeah, I definitely think you're right. The judge is going to determine the best interest of your daughter. So then I called them back and I said, this is what the lawyer said. And I spoke to someone at OSA. And I said, this is what the lawyer said, so I'm going to go get this hearing. And he started yelling at me, threatening me, saying, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to get in trouble? What are you really trying to do here? Really, what are your intentions? Things like that. I said, it's exactly what I said. I'm simply going to go get this hearing. So then they started saying, oh, well, in exchange, instead of paying child support, we're going to help you financially. We're going to help you study policies from L. Ron Hubbard on finances so you can get your finances in order and learn how to make more money. And I said, I don't think so. The only thing I need to do is finish my education, which I completely missed, and then continue it. And it's going to be a long process. It's going to take several years. And in the future, I will make a lot more money. And then at that point, when I have enough money to support her all by myself, I'll stop asking you for child support. I'm only asking you now because I have to. I have no choice. I'm like desperate. And they're like, no, we'll help you sort it all out. I said, that's not what I need. I'm already sorting it out. I'm already getting, my high school education finished, and I'm going to start college. So that didn't go over well. And then, so then Jason started saying to me, oh, I want to see Kate. I want to build a relationship with her. And I knew, I was never going to stop him or his parents. I wasn't, because I didn't feel it was my place to say they can't see you. They can't see her. But I knew that he was just saying this to get on my good side, so I'd stop asking for child support, and that's wrong. And I also knew that it was going to change, that in a month later he'd say, oh, I can't see her anymore, because he was being told he couldn't see her. Now he's being told to see her. So I said...
how did you know that this wasn't just Jason changing his mind? How did you know he was being ordered?
Well, I knew him, for one. I've been married to him for like 4.5 years. And I knew from my old job of exactly what's done. It would have been my job to tell him, do this, now do this. And I also knew that posts change a lot, and different people come in with different opinions. And because this was a relatively new thing of people leaving and having a baby, it wasn't sorted out, and they didn't really know what they were doing, so opinions were being thrown back and forth. And actually, I know even more because I asked him. I said, why did you write to me and tell me you couldn't see her? Were you told to do that? And he said, yes. He said, I was shown these policies, and I was, and then I decided, and with some help, that it was the best thing. And same thing was telling his parents not to see her anymore. So he told me he was told that, but I knew already, So then I said, okay, I'll think about it, because he was now saying he wanted a relationship with her, and I thought about it, and I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to say no, but I'm going to test him. Because I personally don't think, I had read, if your child has a parent that's going to be there some of the time, but it's not set in stone, they're not going to see them once a week, or even once every 2 weeks. If it's just going to be, they're kind of there and they're kind of not, and they show up once in a while, It's better that they're not there at all, because that's so hard on a child. It's so unstabilizing for them to be in and out of their lives. And I thought, I can't have this for her. So I said to him, I said, how about this? If I drop the child support thing, if I just don't ask you for it anymore, you don't have to see her if you don't want to. And he said, okay. So then it was obvious right there that that's all it was. He didn't actually want to build a relationship with her, even though he'd already seen her twice. So I thought that's the very best thing for her. It's so much more important that she just grows up normal, doesn't have any, Scientology in her life at all. That's so much more important than child support. I'll just have to make do.
So you dropped the child support?
I just dropped it, I just said, fine, forget it. I had to do what's very best for her, so I just started working harder, and stuff like that. So, yeah, so at that point, that was about it. His mom called me. Before I told him, okay, you can drop it, his mom called me and said, Jason said we can see Kate again. And I said, well, why did you need his permission? And she couldn't answer that. And then I said, okay, you can see her. All I need you to do is just, and I was really nice to her. I said, I understand. We weren't mad at each other. We weren't yelling. It wasn't, because we were always friends. She's a very nice lady, and I really felt bad for her. I really felt bad because she's so torn, because she's in Scientology, but didn't agree with what Jason was doing, wanted to see Kate, and I knew she was really torn. But in the end, I can't think about that. I got to think about Kate. And that's what I said when I went in there. I said, I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm not here to make a problem. But I'm the only one in this room who cares about her well-being. I'm the only one I'm the only one here for her. She can't speak for herself. I have to have a one-track mind. I have to be the one who's only thinking about her and not thinking about other people and, their problems and things like that. So when I was talking to his mother, I said, you can see her, that's fine. You can see her again. I just need you to do one thing. I need you to promise that if Jason asks you not to see her again, you won't agree to it again. No. You've already, stepped out of her life once. She's older now. She'll remember you. I cannot have you do that. And she said, I don't think Jason will ask me to do that. And I said, but if he does, it's likely he could. If he does ask you that, will you promise not to do that? And she couldn't promise. She said, I can't promise because, what if you get declared? She said, I don't think that's going to happen, but what if it did? Then I'd have to stop seeing her. So I said, well, when you can promise that you won't step out of her life just because someone says you have to, then you can see her. And then I just didn't hear from her.
Have you ever heard from her again? She
sent me a card like a week later saying, why haven't we heard from you? But she knew why. That's how we ended the conversation. If you can just promise that, then you can see her. And yeah, I never heard from her. Never heard from her again. Never again.
Well, Kate,
not even a card for her birthday. Nothing. Not even Christmas. Nothing. So that was the end of that.
Kate sure is a lucky little girl.
Yeah.
She's beautiful.
Thank you. She's sleeping. So yeah, but I think we live with my dad, so she has Zoe to play with, and she has my dad as like a father figure until she gets another one. So, I don't think she's, if it was just me in like an apartment by myself, that would be really horrible. That'd be horrible for her, but I think she's doing fine. Well, but I'm going to have a hard time. I've always thought, what am I going to tell her? Because I'm not going to say, your father is a horrible, horrible person and he abandoned you. Because you should never say things like that, and then that would make her feel worse. So I guess I'm going to just have to do it. I don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea when because she hasn't asked me yet. She's not even 2.5. She hasn't said, where's my daddy? But she knows what a daddy is. She knows I have a daddy, so it's coming soon, and I really have absolutely no idea what I'm supposed to say to her.
Well, she knows you love her.
Yeah, yeah.
And she knows your dad loves her.
Yeah.
And your sister loves her.
Yeah.
So she's got a wonderful family.
Yeah. In terms of how she's doing and, how she's going to grow up, I think it's going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.